Hello guys, good day and welcome back to my channel. My name is Blessing Ogaba of Belwin Creations. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this beautiful corset. Now this is like a foundational class to making a corset successfully. Every corset you see is based on this, and we'll be beginning our corset class with this corset crop top. Okay, if you want to make a long gown or dress, this is where you begin from. Alright, let's get into the training. I've gone ahead to mark out my shoulder line, bust line, under bust line and waistline, and now I'm marking out my bust span, which is 7 inches divided by 2 will give me 3.5. I'm marking that all the way from my shoulder line down to my waistline. Then I'm going to connect all the lines using my ruler to give me a parallel line, and I'm going to be drawing 2 parallel lines, which will help me form my bustier and later on my corset cup. And this line is 1 inch apart for someone like me that has a smaller bust, but for a larger person you may want to use 1.5 inch for the bust allowance. And now I'm going to measure my neck depth from my shoulder line downwards, and that's for this tutorial I'll be using 6.5 inches. You can bring yours lower than this if you wish to. And on my bustier allowance side, I'm going to be marking out 5.5 inches, just 1 inch difference, and then I'll go after onwards to mark out my armhole. I'm using 1 inch before my bust line for my armhole line, and then using my curve I'm going to curve out my armhole. I'm doing this so that it will help me guide and blend my neckline very well. So my armhole there will serve as a guide to my neckline. Then I'll go ahead and carve out my neckline the way I wish to. You want to give it as much curve as possible. You don't want it to go on a straight line, so that you give it that curve and sleek effect. And as you can see, I'm placing my curve on the neckline in such a way that it blends out into my armhole line. You want to ensure that you have already drawn your armhole line initially. This is the good thing about that. It will help you to blend your neckline very well. Okay, and I'm done with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and carve out my bust, and I'm using 1.5 inch, sorry, that's 1/2 inch away from my neckline on both lines, and on my under bust line as well for both sides, my center front and my side front. And using my curve, I'm going to curve that out. In case you want a more detailed video on how to achieve this, you can check in my description box. In my channel here, I've already made a detailed video on how to make a straight dart off the shoulder bustier. So this is eventually just what we are making here, a straight dart bustier of the shoulder bustier, and thereafter we go ahead and carve out our corset cups from it. So it's really that simple. That's the reason why I'm not giving much emphasis on this right now. So you can check that in the description box. I already made a detailed video on that, and then it will help you more understand this process, just in case you don't get it now. So I'm just going ahead to mark out my bustier. I'm making sure that I curve it out very well. Okay. In case you don't have this type of curve, in my previous video you can see that I didn't use any curve. I was just good with my hands, but this curve makes the work really much more easier and more effective. So you may just want to get it for yourself, but without that you can be fine as well. And on the center front line, the middle line exactly, I'm marking out 1/2 inch on the under bust line. I'm also supposed to make a curve there, so that I'll cover out my center front. When making a corset, your center front is not supposed to be lying straight. as you would your normal blouse. Okay, so that will be doing that much more later when I'm done with the entire front piece. Okay, so but I've just marked out the 1/2 inch there, and now I'm going to give my armhole dart. This is very important, and at the armhole line I've marked out 1 inch, and then I'm going to draw like a V line connecting from my armhole down to my bust point at the sides there. As you can see, I'm doing that so that you don't have a bulge on your bust side close to the armhole after you finish making your dress. You can go ahead and make this directly on your fabric, but I prefer to do that on the pattern so that I will not have any seam showing at the end of the day on my fabric, actual fabric. So I prefer closing that here in the pattern so that my clothes will be free of any seam. Alright, so I'm just going to fold that in the V line entirely in to close it there as if I'm sewing it, and then I'm going to use a tape, paper tape, cello tape, whatever tape you have, to just hold that in place. As you can see there, I'm holding that in place, so it will act exactly as I would if I had stitched that directly on my fabric. So it does exactly the same work, so it's easy and stress free compared to doing it directly on your fabric, and it's more accurate. Okay, so I've done that, and it's, of course, my pattern is no longer lying down flat anymore because of that. So I'll go ahead now and then carve out my corset cup. Now, as you can see, I'm placing it from my under bust all the way to the armhole side for the side front. I already have an idea of how my corset should be. Okay, so it's almost the same thing for everybody, so you just want to do that. And for the center front, I'm marking out 1 inch from the center front inward on the neckline there, and then placing my curve also on the under bust up to the neckline to meet that 1 inch, and then I'll draw out my cup line. As you can see there, I've done that. So that is just it. That is how to get your corset cup. Okay, you just have to draft your off the shoulder straight bustier, then you just curve out your curve from there. Okay, and now I'm going ahead to do my shaping. All right, I already have a detailed explanation in the video I said earlier on how to make your straight dart bustier, which is, the link is already there in the description box. So I'm doing my shaping for my bust, my under bust, and my waistline, as you can see in this video. Thereafter, I'm adding my seam allowance. You can make yours up to 3 inches. I just like to give a lot of allowance in my clothes. Almost all my clothes I give up to 2.5-3 inches of seam allowance. That will be depending on the actual kind of clothes I'm making. All right, so if it is something that doesn't really need that much allowance, I don't give up to that. But as this video is a beginner's tutorial video, so you want to give up to that. And then I'm going to blend in my armhole back. As you can see, when I made the darts there, it shifted, so I'm going to blend it back in to meet with my neckline. Okay, you want to do that very well. Okay, to meet with your neckline. And then I'm just going to also blend the bust point there as well. It's actually shifted when I made the armhole dart, so I'm blending it back in. Okay, so you want to ensure that you do that as well. Make sure you blend it very well. Then I'm going to be carving out the cup. On the bust line there at the side, I'm going to be marking down 1/2 inch both sides upwards before and after the bust line. As you can see there, I'm marking 1/2 inch before and after the bust line on the side front, and I'll do the same thing for this other side as well. On the center front, 1/2 inch before and after the bust line, and I'm going to draw a straight line to form a V shape to the bust point there. I'll be drawing a V shaped line to the bust point over there if you want to achieve that actual shape of corset. Okay, so that's what I'm doing there right now on both sides, just 1/2 inch before and after the bust line to achieve a V-shaped corset line to form my cup. So I'm pretty much done with the drafting now, and I'm going to be cutting out to continue with the pattern. And in case you're not satisfied with this neckline, you can still bring it down, shape it the way you want to. And because corset can be very tricky, so I'm going to number all my patterns, all my different parts. I'm going to number. As you can see, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 for all the sides, and I'm giving a nudge at the lower part of the corset there to indicate that that is going for the center front. Okay, as you can see, I've made an angle at which when I cut it out, I'm going to give it a nudge, and as you can see, this sides, I'm going to give it an arrow to show that that is going to the center front and side front respectively. So you want to label all your corset parts the way and manner in which you would understand after you cut out. In case it gets scattered or something, you won't have to be worrying about which parts goes where. So please take your time and give it a good label so that you don't forget or you don't get things mixed up. If you want to write up, you want to write down, center front, side front, please do it as much as you can to avoid bad stories later. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. Like I said earlier, if you're not satisfied with this shape of neckline, you can actually give it a more steeper shape, a more curvy shape, the way you would want to. Okay, I just discovered that my armhole didn't really blend into my neckline, so I'm going to do that now. I'm blending it properly into my neckline. That came as a result of me closing the armhole that's there. So I'm closing it in. Okay, I'm drawing it in and I'm cutting it out. So you would want to cut out the same way I'm doing in this video now. Please ensure that you use the correct measurements for the shaping, and of course your bust span as well. I haven't made mention of any measurements because our measurements differ. Okay, so I'm going to cut it out on the border lines, and I'm flipping it over because of my position, but hope you just follow through the way and manner in which I'm cutting so that you don't get things mixed up. Please ensure that you cut accurately on the lines. It is very important that you do so. So it's time for us to cut out our cup, okay, which I'm doing now. Cut out your cup. So you see invariably it is just a straight off the shoulder bust here. You just need to just mark out your cups and then bring it out for your center front and side front respectively. So now we have our center front and side front pieces all done. So remember the V line we did earlier on the cups. I'm going to cut that out too. Okay, this is very easy, simple and straightforward. Not too much calculations involved. Sometimes you may want to bear witness with me that the calculations in fashion sometimes is just outrageous. Okay, but this is a very simple step in achieving a unique and sleek corset. As you can see, why I was emphasizing on labeling your corsets. As you can see now, because I've labeled them earlier, it's not going to give me an issue locating which one is which and which one is going for each side. So as you can see, I am done cutting everything. So now I'm going to treat the bust side. I prefer using tape to hold everything in place right now as I'm doing my pattern drafting, to avoid stitching later, so that everything will come out sleek and unique. So I'm just going to grab my tape and then push my center front and side front aside while I deal with the cup. Okay, so I'm labeling my center front and side front pieces, and I'll set it aside and then held back to my cup. So now my cup will be divided into two, the upper part and then the lower part. Okay, and I'm going to glue the upper parts separately from the lower part. You can go ahead and glue the upper part using your sellotape or whatever tape you have, and then you can stitch the lower part if you wish to. But like I said earlier, I prefer doing everything on the block so that I'll have less stitches to make on my main fabric. So I'll just go ahead and prepare my tape, cut it into small pieces, sizes, so that it will help me in the process. As you can see, I'm taping the upper part of my cup to become one, so I do not have to stitch both of them again. So I'm stitching. Make sure that you do that very well. Let there be no hole or any space in between. You want to glue them together perfectly. You want to do this bit by bit because it will create a curve and a bulge. You know, it's not supposed to be flat. Okay, so the upper part is just going to give me a little curve, and then I'll trim the under part later on. Then I'll move down to the lower part and I'll start from the down part upwards. Any way we do anyhow, but I just prefer doing it from the lower part upwards. So step by step, I'm going to glue that using my tape, and of course it's not going to be on a straight line, so at the end of the day it will give me a curve. As you can see, you want to be very careful when you're doing this. It's very important. Okay, it's quite easy and stress-free when you are doing the sewing on the main fabric. I do this for most of my cups and it works out well, and for my clients as well. So I'm done stitching. Now you want to look at the edges for in case there's any bulge there or sharp pointed edges. You want to trim that off. And for this upper part, I think I'll even be needing my curve to blend that out. You don't want it to be too pointy, so you blend that out and then you cut off the excess that came about because of the stitching there. Okay, so now you have your upper and your lower parts, and then remember the angle nudges I gave indicating the side that it should be facing, the center front, the side front. I'm just going to be cutting out that nudge to show that that particular part of my upper and lower cup is going to the side front, so that I don't get things mixed up. Now I'm going to label it down and up. So now I have my two cups, the upper part and the lower part. You may want to go through this process again to ensure that you get it accurately. Now to my center front, As you can see, I told you earlier that I drew a 1/2 inch line in the center front there on my under bust to curve it out, so which I have drawn the line there. As you can see, it's supposed to be on a curve, not a straight line. And I'll go ahead and duplicate this to give my center front 2 pieces. This is because normally a corset is supposed to have a joint in the middle, like your zipper allowance. It's supposed to have a joint in the middle. It's not like your normal dresses that the center front is not on the selvage edge. You don't cut it, but in the corset you usually cut it. But however, we can overdo that. We can avoid that by duplicating the center front and then stitching that middle part. And that middle part doesn't go on a straight line. It's always on a curve. If you leave it on a straight line, it's going to form a bulge on the middle front, the bust line. It's not going to slip into your bust, your 2 breasts, as it's supposed to be. So I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to duplicate the center front side, okay, as you can see there, and then I'm going to cut out that curve that I've made earlier. You can see the line there is visible. So I curved it in. You may want to curve yours deeply to 1 inch or thereabouts. As you can see, I'm cutting out that line, that curve I made for both pieces, both the original piece and the ones I've duplicated. And then using my tape, I will glue it back. You want to make sure that you cut that out exactly. As you can see, the middle part there has that already curve that I'm talking about. It's not lying straight together, and so I'm going to cut out my tapes and then I'm going to glue them. Instead of me making the stitch directly on the fabric, I'm going to be doing this method instead. Some of my corset have that stitch in the middle, and I just decided to make this ones without the stitch in the middle. So yeah, this is pretty much how we come about that. And in case you still want yours to have that stitch in the middle, after cutting this out, you just want to give the allowance for your stitching, maybe 1/2 inch or 1 inch allowance in front, and then you mark it all through. So carefully and diligently, I'm going to glue that center front back to give me 2 pieces of my center front. So I'm doing that right now. You want to ensure that there is no hole or space in between. So you glue them back together to form 1 piece, which you transfer later on to your actual fabric, and then you cut out to give you your center front. This is the only piece I'm going to be making double-sided. The rest is fine with the single piece that I made already. So I'm just making the final glue there with my tape. And there we go. You want to make sure that it's relaxed. For the back side, I've also gone ahead to mark out my bust line, under bust line, my waistline, and of course my shoulder line as well. And underneath my waistline, I have already given 1 inch allowance, and now I'm drawing using my ruler to draw my zip allowance, which is 1 inch. This my ruler is about 1 inch long. Okay, so thereafter I'm going to draw my armhole line, which is 1 inch before my bust line. Okay, and I've drawn that. It's just like I did with the front piece as well. And I'm going to draw out my armhole, okay, so as to get an idea of how to carve out my neckline. Thereafter, I'll go ahead and mark out my dart all the way from my bust line down to my waistline. And this time around, I'll be drawing a single line. There is no bustier allowance for the back, so I'm not going to be drawing 2 parallel lines on my bust band like I did in the front piece. But there I'm going to be marking 3/4 inch on both sides at the waistline side, and then I'm going to draw a V straight line on both sides for my darts. And like I said earlier, I prefer doing everything on my block. I'm also going to be closing my darts on the block, and I will fold that to meet the other line, and then using my tape glue it together. So you want to make sure that you stretch that out, you fold that out very well to whatever extent it can get to. As you can see, mine is almost reaching my shoulder line. You want to glue that out, and now I'm using a tape to hold that in place. Okay, is what I'm doing here is equivalent to catching your dart directly on your fabric at the end of the day. Okay, so here I'm just releasing myself of the stress and making sure that my dress comes out without any seam, and then I'll mark out my center back neck depth. Okay, so whatever depth you want to give to yours is free for you, and thereafter I'll go ahead and do my shaping. Okay, so I'm using my own measurements to do the shaping, as you can see here, and then adding my allowance. For the back, I'm going to be using 2 inches allowance. I always make my back allowance half of an inch smaller than that of my front. Okay, because at the back I don't have to catch any dart or anything already. So now from the allowance line there at the armhole, edge of the armhole, I'm going to carve out my neckline. Okay, to any depth that I want to. In case you don't want yours that deep, you can take it upwards a little. So as you can see, I've carved out my back neck depth to that. I didn't actually use any particular measurements here, so you may want to measure yours out and then carve it appropriately, but I think I'm okay with this. And there goes my full back. Now this is if I want my corset to come with a zipper instead of the corset loops. So if I want a corset loops, I'm going to mark out how wide my corset loop should be. On my waistline, I think I've marked about 3.5 inches, and on the neckline there, I think I marked about 5.5 inches, and then I'm going to draw a straight line connecting both lines. You may want to cut that off immediately, but because I would like to use this pattern later on for a zipper fabric, so I will just fold that in to give way and then place on my fabric to cut, and then so that later on when I want to make a zipper corset, I can still use that pattern instead of making another pattern. So here I have a scrap remaining fabrics. You may have those leftover fabrics that are not really up to a yard or thereabout that you are thinking of what to do with it. This is one of the best projects for you to go ahead and do it. Okay, it's very good. It's not good to throw away leftover fabrics. You don't know what good can come out of it. So this is just a typical example of what you can do with some leftover fabrics. I have a whole lot of them in my wardrobe, and quickly I'm going to show you how to cut the cup for the front part. You know that particular part is not flat, so this is how I place it on the fabric to cut out. You want to do it step by step, gradually. You know it's not flat. Even it's flat, you just place it and then go one way. So this is the step I use to cut out. So this is the only part I'll be showing you how to place on your fabric. The rest is just easy. Just place it on your fabric and then cut it out. But for the cups, I have to just show you how to do it because it's not on a flat. Okay, it's curved. So this is how I arrange it on my pattern and then cut. And remember, this is a one-sided pattern, so everything you'll be cutting have to be in 2 pieces. This my fabric is actually 2 layers. Okay, so that's to give me my left and my right side respectively. Okay, so I'm cutting it out after pinning it. Although it may come out, the fabric may come out looking like as if it's flat, but it's not actually flat. It's quite different because your pattern is curved. So this is it, and I'm going to, for the down part, and I'm going to be going ahead to cut the upper part of my corset cup. So you want to make sure that you place it well in case you have a fabric like mine that is patterned. Make sure you place it well and then you cut out. Remember, this is scrap fabric, so it's not like I have a handful to myself to use. So I'm trying as much as possible to maximize this fabric. So just go ahead and place and then pin it and cut it out. You want to be very careful while you're doing this so as not to make any mistakes. So you're cutting it out. Remember, like I said earlier, if you're not okay with the shape of the neckline of the cup, you can actually reshape it and recut it to your taste. If you want it to be more steep, you want it to come to be more revealing, you can go ahead and do that now. It's not too late. Otherwise, you just go on with this and then give it a notch. Remember, I gave a notch to indicate which side goes to the center front side. You want to give that to your fabric as well, so as not to have any mistakes. So you can see I've already placed the other patterns on my fabric and I've cut it out. That's my back and this is my front sides, and everything is complete now on my pattern and my fabrics. So you want to go ahead and iron your stay on it, on the wrong face of your fabric. This is the stay I normally use. You want to use the more better quality ones, the interwoven ones. I think I have one that I did. Let me just quickly grab it and then show it to you guys what I'm talking about. So this is the one I've already done for the upper part of my cup. So I ironed a lot of layers on the wrong face of this fabric to give it that thickness. Why I'm doing this, I normally do this whether I'm using a cup or ready-made cup or not. So you just want to do this, iron as much layers as possible like you can to make it stronger before you add your cup to it. Your cup is another advantage. There is also something we can also add to it, which is your felt. I think in Nigeria we call it wadding. Okay, it does the same thing. So this is my lining as well. I've gone ahead and cut it out, my lining as well, and I've added one layer of stay to make it strong as well. Okay, and the rest of the front part of my fabric, I just added 2 layers of that stay on it just to give it that perfect finishing and look. Okay, so this is my front piece as well. I've ironed 2 layers on the center front and side front. It is only the cups that I added up to like 6 layers of the stay to make it more strong. Okay, the down part and the upper part of the cup that I added up to 4, 5, 6 layers of the stay because I want that part very strong. And for this tutorial, I'm not going to be adding any cup. I already have a video on how to add cup to your corset, to your fabric. This is the felt I was talking about earlier. You may want to add that now to the cup only to make it more stronger. I think I have a corset that I used this instead of cup and it came out very well. Okay, you may want to add that to it too. Just cut it accordingly to the size of the cup and then you're done. So I'm going to arrange all my patterns and set aside because I'll be using it later. A lot of scrap fabrics I have to use for it, so I wouldn't want to throw that out or else I'll find myself doing it all over again. So guys, this is it. This is my cutout pattern, and then I'll go right into showing you guys how to sew this. For those of you who don't know how to sew, it's one thing to know how to cut, draft the pattern. It's another thing to know how to sew this to achieve the required results. And to sew this, I'm going to start by giving the correct notch. Okay, so I'm folding the down part into 2 and then getting the center piece for the upper part and the lower part of the down part, and I'm going to do the same thing for the up as well. You want to get all the points correctly, the middle points correctly of your edges. Okay, the down and upper parts of your edges of both the upper part and the down part of your cups. I'm doing it for both the left and the right hand side. This will help me to join it perfectly. Okay, so I'm doing that now. I want to get the middle points of all the sides. Okay, I've done that now. So I'm going to flip over the upper part to the down part of my cup, and that place I just nudge, ensure that it's meeting there, okay, in the middle part, and then I'm going to give it a pin. Make sure that you want to fasten that together so that it doesn't shake or move or gets displaced. Okay, so you pin that, and then do that for the other side as well. Pin that in place, and then you stitch it using 1/2 or 1/4 of an inch. Remember, it already have the curve, so you just follow through from beginning to the end using half, not more than 1/2 of an inch. Let me use a pencil to actually draw that line so that you get a picture of what the allowance I'm talking about. So you stitch just that way, okay, for both sides. So I'll take it over to my sewing machine and do that. As you can see, I've stitched both sides already. Okay, so I'm going to give it a notch to ease the tension there for both sides. I'm giving it a nudge to ease the tension. Now this is where your bust hem comes in play. You may want to give that a good press using your pressing iron and your hem. I've also made a video on how to make hem in my channel here. As you can see, without a cup, because I ironed it with stay, you can see that my corset cup is coming out well curved, well rounded, well shaped, even without a cup, because I used the stay. Okay, so you want to do that out, and of course there may be some irregularities in the cup, so you want to trim off the excess that may come on the sides. You want to give it a good shape, okay, but not too much. I'm loving my cups already. Then I'll go ahead to continue sewing. The next thing to do is to join the front sides together. Okay, so the center front will be placed in the middle, and then the side fronts will be placed on each side, and then I'm going to get the midpoint of that line, and then using 1/2 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch, I'm going to sew it using a curve. Let it not go on a straight line, or else it won't give you a very good shape. So make sure that you curve the line a little, going inwards in the midway, like I did in the picture here. I've taken my time to visualize this for you, so do not mind if I'm not explaining it better. So as you can see, I first of all used 1/2 of an inch. It didn't give me the required result, so now I'm going ahead to use 3/4 of an inch to curve that out. It really give you a good effect if you do that, and I'm doing that for the right side as well. 3/4 of an inch in the halfway through to curve it in, and then draw out the line very well, and then sew. Don't sew on a straight line, please. It won't give you a very good shape at the end of the day. Okay, trust me, I've done this before and the experience is not sweet, it's not good. So I'm going to pin this and then sew exactly on the line as I have drawn out. So you want to do the same for yours as well. So I'll take this to my sewing machine, and then I'll sew on the lines to give me my front piece. Pin this. So guys, I've done the sewing, and as you can see, this is it. Okay, so you want to give it a nudge to ease the tension since you didn't sew on a straight line. So you want to just give it a quick nudge there. Be careful so that you don't cut your actual seam. Okay, so you want to flatten that out and then give it a good press so that your work will come out neat. So now, as you can see, my cup is going on in. Okay, and so I'm going to stitch my cup. Remember I folded down part into two and then I gave it a notch in the middle part. Yes, that middle part now will come in play, as that will go to directly on the stitch line there at the dart place. Okay, so I'm going to pin that out for both sides directly on the dart. That middle notch that I gave earlier, that's the reason why I gave that notch, so that you get the middle part. And then I'll take it over to my sewing machine and then I'll stitch it. For those of you who don't know how to join a cup, this is a quick video of how to do that. I'm taking my time to do all this because this is a complete beginner's guide to making a corset. Every other complicated corset you see, this is the foundation to which it is being developed. Apart from the back's corset, every other corset you see comes from this. The back's corset is the one that I think is also called Victorian corset, the one that comes with a V-shaped on the front waistline. Okay, that's the only thing left out. So this is the perfect way to join your corset cup, starting from the middle side upwards, then you flip it over to the other side and also sew from the middle side upwards again. I did not sew my corset from beginning to beginning, no. I start from the middle part of the cup outwards on both sides and then I flip it over. Okay, so that is how I join my corset cup. So I'm doing that for the both cups. I'm joining it using my sewing machine. It may be a little bit tricky and seem to be difficult, but just hold on there, you will definitely get it. So I've joined my cups. Okay, and here it is. You want to join the other parts as well. So quickly, if you had intend using boning for this corset, you would have want to do that before joining your cups. Okay, the moment you joined your dart lines previously, before this, you would have added your boning. I already have a video on how to attach boning to your corset. I'll add that to the description box, so you want to check the link for that as well on my description box. How to add your boning. You want to add your boning before joining your corset cups. Do not join your corset cups before adding your boning. Okay, so you do that before joining your corset cups. So steadily, patiently, I'm joining my cups. Okay, I think I'm on the final one now, and you'll soon see how that comes out. You want to be very careful there. And I'm done. So this is my corset cups, my entire front parts, and I've also gone ahead to join the back side. As you can see, I'm giving it a notch there because of the side seam. It's not on a straight line, so I want it to be ease. And this is the moment you would iron out and add your cups. I've also done the entire process on my lining as well. Okay, the entire process I made for the actual fabric, you want to go over that also with your lining as well. All right, and as you can see, the lining is also looking beautiful. You want to give it a good press. I did not give this a good press, so you flip it over and then let's stitch it. You want to ensure that if you did this correctly, it's going to align very well. All the stitches for both the lining and the actual fabric is going to align. If it doesn't align, then there's a problem somewhere and it won't come out nice. Trust me, when you flip it over to the good face. So you want to ensure that both your lining and your fabric, all the lines, all the stitching is aligning neatly. So I'm just going to pin it and then stitch the neckline, okay, as it is curved. Let me emphasize there again that if you are not okay with the neckline, it is also not too late to give it the kind of curve and shape that you want it to have. If you want it more steep, more revealing, you can also actually do that now, but I'm okay with it this way. Okay, so I'm just going ahead to pin it. Now you don't have to worry if the necklines of the sides of your corset is not meeting. Okay, remember that we actually carved out the cup, so of course that carving out will make it not to meet, so definitely you have to trim. And as you can see, for the down part, it is not meeting. It is not supposed to meet. The lining is supposed to be shorter than the actual fabric, so that by the time you flip it over, the lining will not be showing on the actual good face of your fabric. So I'm going to trim off that armhole side on the neckline there that is not meeting. I'm going to make sure that is equal. Using my curve, I'm going to curve that out to any shape you want. Okay, so I'm just going to blend it out again on both sides. I'm just going to mark out where I want it to be, and I'm bringing mine a little bit lower than it was before. So you can imagine that at the end of the day, the back of my corset will be quite lower. You want to make yours higher if you want to, or any length. As you can see here, I used 9 inches. You can make yours 10 if there's still room for that. So I'm doing that on the other side as well. Please ensure that your lines are meeting, your seam lines are meeting, both lining and fabric. Okay, then I'm carving that out, and ensure that at the hemming side your lining is shorter than your fabric. Remember, this is a crop corset. It's not as if you are going to be joining a skirt underneath to make it a long gown. So it's only when you are adding a skirt underneath to make it a long gown that the lining and the fabric should be equal. But since we are going to give it a turn to give you your corset, you want to ensure that the lining is shorter than the fabric, maybe by 1 inch, not quite much. So I'm going ahead to stitch it, and as you can see, I have stitched the upper part all the way through, following the curve as it should be. And this is the other part, bad face of it. Okay, so now I'll go ahead to the hemming line, and then I'll drag the lining to meet with the fabric. Okay, that is the goal, for your lining not to be showing outwards when you wear your fabric. And then as you can see, all my seam lines are meeting. Okay, that to that, shaping side to shaping side, zipper side to zipper side. Ensure that all those points are meeting. If you did your homework well, you find out that it is meeting. If it doesn't meet, your clothes will not come out very well. There may be some squeezing or something like that, you know. So I'm just going to pin it all the way through. Please take your time to do this very well so that it will come out neatly. And pardon me, during this process I've not been ironing. Please make sure that you iron every step of the way so that your dress will come out neatly. But nevertheless, as you can see in my introduction video, the corset actually came out nice, even though I didn't iron it during this process. But that's not an excuse for you to be lazy about ironing. Okay, it's very good and necessary for you to iron during the process than after the process. Trust me, it's more stressful for you to iron after the process than during the process. So as you can see, the bulge in the front, that is because the lining is actually shorter than the fabric. So just go ahead and sew that on a straight line using 1/2 inch like I did on the upper neckline part, and then I'll be back to show you the result. So this is it now. As you can see here, because the lining is shorter than the fabric, you can see that the fabric is longer. And then I'm going to make sure that I fold it in just like this, so that by the time I flip it over to the good face, the lining will not be showing outwards like I said earlier. So this is the reason why the lining has to be shorter than the fabric, as you can see. So on both sides I have achieved the same result. So we'll go ahead to make the corset loops. Okay, so I'm going to get a good amount of my fabric. I didn't actually measure this out, okay, so I just used as much fabric as I did. I don't know the length, but it's two, one for each side. Okay, this is 2 layers of the fabric, and I'm cutting it out on 2 inches wide. I actually want my corset lace to be big, to be bold. Okay, so that's why I'm using 2 inches wide, okay, to make the loops. So I'm going to fold this in, and then I'm going to stitch it using just 1/4 of an inch. Okay, remember I said I want it wide, and this is it. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to turn it. I've already stitched one edge so that it will give me ease, and using my broomstick I'm going to turn that to the good face for both ropes. You would also want to give that a good press before going ahead to cut it into the loops. So I'm turning the second one as well. And as you can see, tada, I have my 2 loops here. So like I said earlier, I want my loops to be wide, so I'm going to cut it the way I want it to be. I think I am okay with this length. Okay, so let me show you what I'm going to be using for my corset lace. The rope, you can see, is 1.5 inches wide. Okay, so I will want to make my loops wide enough to contain it, okay, so that you can pass through it effectively without stress. I think I have one already. I already made, so as you can see for my other corset. So this is it. This is how wide it's going to be, not your usual kind of corset loops. So I want to ensure that it's wide enough, and I think for me I'll be using 3.5 inches for my loops. So I'll be needing about 4 of it. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut 4 of each on each side. That will make it a total of 8. And tada, as you can see, I'm in luck. It actually gave me 4. Okay, so at the end of the day I'll be having 8 of this into 3.5 inches. And I'll go ahead and also fold my rope, which I'm going to be using as my lace, and then sew it using 1/2 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to pin it down and then take it to my sewing machine and then sew, and then flip it just the same way I flipped the rope just now, and then give it a good press as well. So now I'm going to be inserting my loops. So this is my cup. In case you will still wish to add a cup to it, this is it. And this cup is not your regular cup you buy in the market. I actually carved it out from an old bra. I do that a lot. It's no use for you to be throwing out your old bra. You can just use it for your corset cup. So I'm going to be prepping my material to add my loops now. Okay, so I would want to measure the distance that I have out and ensure that you fold it in very well and give it a notch and a pin so that you don't have your lining popping out on your good face. Okay, for the up and the down part, that is your neckline and your waistline part. So after that, I'm going to measure the entire distance I have from my neckline down to my waistline there, and then I'm going to be dividing it by 4. Remember, I had 4 ropes, so if you have about 5 or 6 ropes on each side, you want to be dividing that distance, whatever the distance is. you want to be dividing it by the number of ropes you have. That is just a simple trick. And here, because I'm using 4, dividing it will give me 1/3 of an inch. So I'm going to be using my pencil to mark 1/3 of an inch from the up to the down. Okay, so as you can see, then I'm going to be inserting my loops the way you see as I do it in the video. So you want to watch attentively and follow through just the same way as I'm doing it right now. So I'm done pinning. I'll do the same thing for the other sides, and then I'm going to stitch it using my sewing machine, using 1/2 of an inch, as you can see me drawing. Okay, using 1/2 of an inch, and I'm going to be making 2 parallel lines close to each other, and I'll do the same thing for the other side as well, and then stitch the loops as well. As you can see, I've done that, and I've done 2 parallel lines close to each other to secure it, to make sure that it's very tight, so that when you're pulling your loops it won't come off. Okay, so I've done both sides. Now the challenge is that I've closed everywhere, so there is no way you can turn your clothes out the good face. So I'm just going to pick a suitable spot to lose some stitches, and I'm doing that on the dot line. Okay, and I'm going to lose one of the dot lines to create a way for me to be able to flip this cloth over to the good face. Okay, at least enough that my hand will pass through. You can do that on the hemming line, that's on the waistline, if you want to, and then find a way to stitch it up, or using your hemming gum to glue it back later on. But I don't want to use my hemming line. We're using my dot line instead, and as you can see, I'm trying to flip it over to the good face. In case you added a cup, this will be much more difficult because of the cup, so you want to do your loosening on the hemming line. That will make it much more easier for you. Don't go overboard with it, so that you don't have a lot of hole to cover up later. Just a little space that will be enough for your hand to pass through and bring it out with ease is enough. Okay, so I'm just trying to flatten this out and give it a good finishing there. Okay, so as you can see, my loops are coming out very okay. So you want to make sure that this is well laid out, and then you give it a good press. Use your pressing iron to iron it out very well. So I'm just going to try as much as possible to arrange it so that it will come out very well. So this is, yeah, a very simple corset. No cups, no boning. As like I said earlier, this video is for beginners. With this, you can build on it. This is just a foundation for you to work on any kind of corset you wish to. As time goes on in my channel, I'm going to be showing you more complicated ways of making your corset. As you can see, because our lining was shorter than our actual fabric, as you can see, there's no cause for alarm. The lining is not showing outwards. You may want to use your hemming gum to press the neckline and the hemming of this dress. Using that hole you create, just insert it in bit by bit and then iron it. Make sure that the lining is not showing outside, and then iron it all the way through from beginning to end. Okay, so that it will give it a good finish. And then after you're done, you close up your hole. Okay, just stitch it outwards on top, make a top stitch on it, and that will be it. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and pin my neckline so that it will be in place for you to see how beautiful it is. Okay, I'm not going to be doing any ironing now. I'll be doing that much more later, but please go ahead, give it a good press. And this is my loops, my lace. Okay, as you can see, I've done it, I've stitched it, and I've turned it to the good face. So you will have to lace up your corset back the way and manner in which you would want to. So thank you guys for watching my video. Please subscribe, like, share this video, comment, and of course, if you happen to make a corset using my tutorial, I'd like to see your pictures as well. Okay, thank you very much for watching. All right, so you just lace this up and look good, look beautiful. Stay blessed. And of course, this is my other corset I told you earlier. As you can see here, I did the opening by the sides, the shaping side, and this is another floral one of it that I made. Okay, I didn't add any loops to this because I'm going to make the hole, and this is the one I made using a zipper. As you can see, this is actually one of my favorites. So don't throw away your scrap fabrics. You can use it for projects like this.